I was in a wheelchair for 6 weeks. And then after that, it was such a bizarre experience to try to walk again with a cane, and for several more weeks after that, and just not sure what it was going to be like, if I was ever really going to be able to run again. But I did make the decision at one point that this was going to be an inflection point, and it was going to be a positive inflection point. And I didn't have any idea what that meant or how that was going to be possible, but that I knew I had a choice of how I dealt with the rest of my life from here. And it could be, I could look back on this as the worst thing that had happened, or I could look back on this as something that was really positive and led to positive change. And I just made a decision that that would be the case.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flow Over Fear podcast, where it is our mission to help you to rise above fear and realize your ultimate potential in leadership and life. I'm your host, Adam Hill, and it is my goal to share with you the human side of high performance. My guests share their experience with fear, anxiety, struggle, challenge, and most importantly, despite all of it, how they rose above it to achieve incredible results. So, if you're ready to rise up, let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to the Flow Over Fear podcast. I am very grateful you're joining us today. I have a really good friend who I have known for quite a few years now through the endurance world. And ultimately we discovered that we had a lot in common from the business world as well, as far as where we currently work and things like that. But Alyson Watson is her name, and she is an incredible athlete, and she's also an executive, a professional. She's a mom of two amazing children and the CEO of Woodard & Curran, a 1,200-person science, engineering, construction, and operations firm that's focused on water and the environment. And she's also made a name for herself in the long-distance triathlon and cycling circles, specifically Ironman and ultra-man distance triathlon and endurance cycling. Since going from being a pack-a-day smoker to completing her first sprint triathlon off the couch in 2015, she's racked up a series of incredible athletic achievements, completing her first half Ironman in 2016, her first full in 2017, and then she advanced quickly from there. And ultimately, after a serious injury or a serious crash at Ironman Texas, she came back from that. And we'll talk about that because that's a big deal. There's a lot there. But she came back to record the bike course record at Ironman 70.3 Indian Wells in 2018, and winning her age group, of course, qualifying for the 70.3 World Championships, later on qualifying for the Ironman World Championships at Mount Tremblant, and later finishing the Ultraman in Florida, third overall. And that ultimately qualified her for the Ultraman World Championship, which, of course, COVID took out and caused problems there. She's also the time trial, the 12-hour time trial winner in Borrego Springs in the Ultra Cycling World Championship. And she has entered into, and she finished top 10 at the 2021 Ironman World Championships in St. George. And now she's making a transition into trail running, into long-distance trail running. We're talking 100-mile races. Doing this all while running a 1,200-person business, a family, doing all of that stuff. Man, there's a lot there, Alyson, and I'm really glad you joined us. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm glad you're doing the podcast. I'm really enjoying it so far.
Well, no, thank you. It's, I get to pinch myself every time I get to talk to people like yourself, because it's just an opportunity to learn some incredible things, and honestly, selfishly satisfy a lot of my curiosities about how you achieve it all and are able to do all of these things. Because I enjoy endurance sports as well. I don't know if you know that, but no, but time obviously takes its toll, and it's hard to find that balance. But I'd like to kind of go back in time a bit and just kind of discover, because you mentioned in the bio that you were once a pack-a-day smoker. What got you into the transition into the endurance world, and how did that kind of come into play?
Yeah, my life has definitely not been a straight line. I think a lot of people would say that too. And if I go way back, I was pretty athletic as a kid. I was on swim teams from when I was 8 until I graduated high school. I actually ran the Boston Marathon I just jumped in when I was 17 because I grew up in New Hampshire and you could do that back then. So I was curious to see what it would be like to run a marathon. And, I think life wears you down a little bit, honestly. I didn't have the easiest high school experience. And over time, I think I sort of gave up on myself a little bit. When I was young, I saw Iron Man on TV and I told you I ran a marathon and, you think you can do anything. And then at some point you kind of give that up. And I think I just had been going for so long that around when I finished college, I just took a step back and I, started taking the easier way, I think, in a lot of aspects of life. And, I did smoke and, went out a lot and just had a different lifestyle. And so, through the course of time, moving cross country multiple times, having kids, all of that, it took a while for me to find my way back to athletics. And I'll say I'm not one of those people who loves to go out for a run. It's not something that I've always loved to do. I kind of have always forced myself to do it because I really feel good afterwards and it helps me with stress management and all of that. And so, as I sort of got to more stressful points in my life with young kids, I started to realize that I was missing that. And I actually at one point wrote a letter to the person I ran the Boston Marathon with when I was 17 and just told him that, I appreciated that he'd introduced me to endurance events because I was going to start working out again and get back in shape. And I was going to do something like that. And, I just wanted him to know that that was an important, milestone in my life. So I just started, pretty slowly at first, trying to get in shape. And when I came back to California, so I'm skipping around a bit, but I was living in New England and it was tough. I had been living in California, moved back there, had little kids, didn't really have a strong friend network. It was pretty isolating. And then ended up, moving back to California to take over as CEO of the firm I was working for at the time. We decided that we really needed a work-life balance program. And, this was 2014, so it was a while ago. That's what we called it, work-life balance or employee wellness. And so I put together a group to basically plan events. And they planned a triathlon. So they said, we're going to organize this sprint triathlon. And you have to do it because it's your program. And I was like, there's no way that I'm going to do this. I don't have a bike. I am not exercising. And they basically, guilted me into it. So I got a bike off of Craigslist and did the sprint triathlon. And it helped me remember just the training for it. It helped me remember how much moving and being healthy helps me. So it helps me to balance everything in my life. It sounds like it's adding one more thing, but for me mentally, it actually is subtracting from the stress level. So I did that one triathlon and just fell in love with it and really fell in love with the training. And it was curtains from there. It snowballed ever since.
Well, I love that. I love that idea that you just kind of touched on, that sometimes adding things subtracts things. And I felt the same experience when I first got into the sport as well. It's like, how do you add that, especially the health element, like exercise for this long and doing all this kind of stuff. But, it does, there are some things that kind of just maybe add another element or help to improve our performance in other ways in life. I've got to imagine that that's kind of how you felt, how that impacted you. Yeah,
absolutely. So just starting to turn my life around. And I think probably a lot of young parents can relate to a sense of loss at some point where you may wake up one day and realize that you've lost yourself a little bit. You're so focused on, maybe it's work and your family and all of a sudden you don't know yourself anymore. So that was certainly the case for me. I was coming back to take over this company. Work was going well. My kids were definitely, wonderful. But when I started to focus a little bit on athletics again, it really opened my eyes to that transformation that had taken place, that I hadn't been paying attention to who I was, and I'd sort of lost that. So it wasn't so much that I'd lost myself as an athlete per se. It was just the fact of spending that focused time, which was purely for me and not for anybody else. It wasn't for my employer, and it wasn't for my husband, and it wasn't for my kids. It was purely for me. That act really helped me to start thinking about how to be happy, and what I needed. And so taking that time was almost meditative in a way, for me, but helped me to work through a lot of sadness that I was dealing with, and a lot of the stress, and really be better in all aspects of my life, but to start to lead a much more directed life instead of just sort of living for all of the external forces.
I see. So it's really like the at some point you feel, especially in a a high energy, high stress kind of lifestyle, you feel like you're being you're being pushed and pulled in different directions just by the outside forces, like by what work is doing, by what family is doing, by all this kind of stuff. So you, as you say, you lost yourself for a period of time there. But you found it in the endurance sports, and you found that through basically falling into, it sounds like, a sprint triathlon. How did that? I want to hear that, because I love first triathlon stories. So, so how did that experience go? Did you wear your helmet backwards? Did you put the wetsuit on the wrong way? Tell us the gory details.
Well, no, I didn't do those things, but I did get a flat. And it was the beginning, the whole beginning of triathlon for me was the irony of me being a good cyclist. I've had people say that in a former life I must have run over a cyclist with the bad luck I've had cycling. So my very first experience in triathlon was a sprint triathlon that started with a pool swim, which was good. I grew up as a swimmer. It was still hard because I was out of shape. The bike was like 15 miles, and I got a flat. And not only did I not fix it, I didn't even have a patch kit. Like, I wouldn't have known how to anyway. So I just rode on my flat tire until I finished, and like racked my bike wrong, and then ran the ran the 5K and almost died at the end. But I had done it with obviously a couple of work friends, and we decided that we were going to sign up for an Olympic a couple of months later, just because we thought, well, why not? And at that Olympic, I think I had 2 flats, maybe 3, and then signed up for another one because I was like, this is crazy. And I got a flat at that one. I mean, my first 3 races, I had like 8 flats or something absolutely crazy. And it's just ridiculous that I stayed with it. But I think I'm a little bit stubborn. Yeah. So yeah, I figured at some point, like, this has to normalize. And I have to get through a race without a flat. So that became my whole goal, basically, was to get through the bike leg. I'd been a runner and a swimmer, and that was the big barrier for me.
Yeah. And then you ultimately became like an incredible cyclist. So I'm guessing you got over the flats issue. You figured that piece out, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, part of the reason I had so many flats is because I was also not changing them properly. Like, I was getting pinch flats and didn't realize it. And but yeah, I just, I don't take this approach as much anymore, but at that point in my life, I would have described it as I was a drive a truck through it type of person. Mm-hmm. So if there was a wall there, I was going to drive a truck through it and get to the other side. And I absolutely took the brute force approach to try and get through the bike leg. And it did pay off. I actually got really good at cycling.
I'll say, yeah, you really did. And I remember watching you early on, back when probably the 2016, 2017, right? When you started Psych kind of up and coming. And I remember going to, I was physically at Ironman Texas that year, 2017, I think it was, right? Or 28, I don't remember, 2018. And I remember being there, and I remember that was the year that they changed the bike course to be on just this straightaway toll road that was flat. It was the ideal conditions for a peloton, and boy, were there pelotons. And so I didn't see anything happen. I'd heard that you crashed really bad, and I heard that you were hospitalized, and that you shattered your pelvis. Is that right?
No, that's one of the things that I didn't break.
Oh, you didn't break your pelvis. See, I'm great at identifying the things that didn't happen.
Yeah. No, and that was the year that they pulled all the officials off the bike course. Yeah. So that was just a mess. And I was one of the very few people who crashed totally on my own. So I don't know. I still don't totally know what happened, if I hit debris or what, but I went over the handlebars at like mile 105 and I broke 6 ribs and my sternum, which is a special one to break. That's a real impact for that one. I had a 3rd-degree AC separation of my shoulder. And then on the other side, my leg had stayed clipped in, so I broke the femoral neck, which is like the very top of part of your hip, the very top of your femur. But because it was a weird angle, they had to repair it with a rod. So I, have a rod the length of my femur and 4 screws, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. So went home from that race in a wheelchair, which was not great. But when it happened, it was one of those things where I kind of scooted to the side of the road after I crashed, and like there was a big lump in my shoulder where I had the AC separation. And so I was like, okay, I broke my collarbone and, I think I'm okay. And then I was having trouble breathing, and the volunteers were like, can we pray with you? And I was like, okay, that's really not a good sign. But when I got to the hospital, they, figured out they were asking, well, do you normally have a big lump there? And then they realized I had 6 broken ribs in the sternum. But the sort of funny part of the story is I also had a black eye, which was from the swim. Like I'd gotten kicked in the
really?
face swim. But they were like, did you hit your head? Did you check your helmet? And I was like, no, I think I'm fine. But they weren't sure, like the black eye, what that was from. And so it was just, they kept doing like spot checks, and then they finally did like a full like CT scan. And my doctor later was like, you've had a lifetime's worth of radiation at this point, because I think they figured out that I was not a very reliable witness in terms of what I had actually broken. And I was like, I think I broke my collarbone. They're like, no, you broke everything except your collarbone, basically.
Right. Wow. Yeah. So I guess the moral of the story is ladies and gentlemen, sign up for Ironman. It's the funnest sport you can put. No, but no, I mean, and I would love to, I mean, love is the wrong phrase there. My apologies. But I think I would like to dig into like, what was going through your mind at that moment? Like you're in the hospital, you were on track to becoming like a Kona qualifying, if not a professional triathlete at that time. What was going through your mind? Were you already planning the comeback, or were you?
Oh, there was so much leading into that race because I got good at triathlon really fast. And it was a point in my life, in my personal life, there was a lot going on, and I was not doing great, I will say. And triathlon for me was just really this positive experience and this really positive thing that I had going on in my life. And I was so looking forward to Ironman Texas for all the reasons that you said. It was, I was definitely going for a Kona slot. I was running really well. Like I had just run a marathon, like a 3:15 marathon without training. Like it was going to be a great day for me. And I had this feeling as I was getting into triathlon, this is going to change my life in a positive way. Like this is definitely a positive force in my life. And so I was really fixated on Kona, like everybody is, but more broadly, just this whole beautiful experience that had come into my life, and this source of joy and this new kind of pathway forward. And I remember being in the hospital, and they didn't really know when they went in to fix my hip. They didn't even know how they were going to fix it, because it was a really strange break, and they were hoping to not have to do a hip replacement. I'm 40 years old, and they're hoping that they don't have to replace my hip. And they're saying, hopefully you'll be able to run. We don't really know. And so I was just lying there, and it was like all of those dreams and this whole aspect of my life, which to me was the bright spot and sort of the pathway to a better future in my life at that point. It was like that door just closed in my face. And it was absolutely devastating. And I remember just begging the surgeon as I was going to sleep, like, I want to run again. Like, please make it so I can run again. And for weeks after that, I had nightmares. And in my nightmares, I would try to change the outcome of the crash. Like everything would lead up to it, and it would be like, and then I would crash and I would wake up. And it was was really traumatic and horrible. And I think it was just because at that point in my life, triathlon represented so much more than just a race. It was kind of like freedom and escape and a different future. And it felt like that door really just closed. So the comeback, no, I wasn't planning the comeback yet. I was trying to figure out, what does this mean? And, but I did, and it was tough. Like the first few weeks in particular were really difficult. I was in a wheelchair for 6 weeks. And then after that, it was such a bizarre experience to try to walk again with a cane, and for several more weeks after that, and just not sure what it was going to be like, if I was ever really going to be able to run again. But I did make the decision at one point that this was going to be an inflection point, and it was going to be a positive inflection point. And I didn't have any idea what that meant or how that was going to be possible. But it was so devastating and traumatic that I knew I had a choice, which was I could either let that door slam shut, and maybe it was shut without, anything I could do about it, but that I knew I had a choice of how I dealt with the rest of my life from here. And it could be, I could look back on this as the worst thing that had happened, or I could look back on this as something that was really positive and led to positive change. And I just made a decision that that would be the case, not knowing what that meant, if it meant to come back or if it meant something different.
Wow. So there's a lot of faith there in that choice, right? I mean, yeah, and I mean, like faith, not in the religious way, but just, I mean, generally speaking, there's a common theme that I'm hearing a lot, which is that we always have the power of choice, and that's a powerful thing. It's like, when these outside experiences happen to us, we have the choice to change our perspective on it. And even if we don't know what that outcome will be or know what it looks like yet, having the faith to actually move forward in a direction on a choice, that's hugely powerful. And I'm glad you made that choice, because it looks like it resulted in some pretty incredible things. So what happened from there after that choice?
Yeah. Gosh, so much. So in the triathlon world, I was very fortunate that I recovered from my injuries. I'd like to say I fully recovered. I'll never be back at that run pace, and I don't know if it's because of the crash or not. So I think, that's whether I'm just lazy, I don't know. But I spent that summer rehabbing, and in some respects, things sort of broke in my direction. So I had the surgery in Texas, came back, and I got sort of shuffled around among doctors here because he hadn't done the surgery. So I got a doctor who was a former military doctor who was retiring. So he really didn't care that much, honestly. And I don't mean that to be mean, but he was kind of like, yeah, there's not much that you can do to make it worse. Don't put any pressure on it, and don't fall. Anything else you can do, it might hurt, but you're not gonna injure it. Because I was kind of like, well, can I do this kind of PT, that kind of PT? He's like, do whatever you want, just don't put pressure on it.
So he basically gave you the doctor equivalent of, I'm too old for this crap. So basically, that's what it sounds like.
But for me it was perfect, because I was like, okay, now I know I can do anything. So I was, aqua jogging, and I was spinning with no resistance, and I was doing anything that I could. And he didn't even put me in PT, because he said, you're doing way more than any PT will ever have you do. So just keep doing it. So it gave me the freedom I put together a training plan, and my training plan was like 20 minutes spinning with no resistance, 30 minutes aqua jogging. I mean, it was just silly stuff, but it allowed me to stay on track. And then I just put some goals on the calendar of, this day I'm going to walk. And I really wanted to try to do Ironman 70.3 Santa Rosa. So the crash was the end of April. Santa Rosa was July. And I thought, well, I can probably walk it by then. And I probably could have, but my doctor did say, there's a risk that you could fall off your bike, and that would be very bad, so don't do it. So I didn't do it. But I did sign up for Indian Wells in December, and I spent that whole summer. I mean, I couldn't swim right away because of the upper body injuries, and I couldn't run, for a few months. I couldn't even walk for a couple of months. But I could spin with no resistance. So I spent that summer biking, going from zero resistance up until I could apply resistance, and then eventually swimming when I could, and then elliptical. And I had a fantastic race. So it was sort of that decision of I'm either never going to get on my bike again or I'm going to get over this. And that was the race where I set the bike course record. So it was, April to December, a little under 8 months from my crash. And I was an awesome cyclist at that point because I'd done so much of it. And I actually even ran well. But I, won my age group by like 7 minutes at that race. And it was like, okay, I'm back.
That's incredible.
So that was great. And, personally, I made changes in my life following that. It was, I think, realizing that I could make that choice, that this thing that was devastating at the time could be a positive force in my life, gave me, in some respects, the strength to apply that approach in other aspects. So in, realizing that I didn't need to be stuck in other areas of my life. And that I could make a choice and that, my future could still be more positive than, it might have been otherwise. And that was really within my control. But it was really, I think, important in that kind of self-efficacy, reinforcing that.
So so it leveled up your ability to believe that you were capable of more than what you were doing. Do you mind if I ask what other areas of your life that you were able to apply that to, or?
Yeah, I mean, my personal life. So I'm, this is a tough one, but leaving a marriage that was unhappy. And there's a lot there and I don't hold any, negativity. That was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And in a lot of respects, probably the most important thing that I've ever done. And I don't think that I would have ever been able to do that. I think this is part of what gave me the strength to make that change, which has been just so instrumental in a lot of the things that have come after. Mm-hmm. The cycling to like just being able to branch out a little bit. So not having to hold quite so tightly to triathlon. After that Indian Wells race, it was still, well, maybe I want to go after my pro card, but I wasn't loving it as much because it felt more like a chore at that point. So being able to let go of that a little bit and start doing long, just double centuries and different challenges related to cycling and, trail running and doing different things instead of feeling like this is my ticket out. It opened up that freedom to recognize there's not one pathway out. There's not one thing that's going to take me where I need to go and I have to hold on to it. Every day I'm making choices and I can make choices that are going to lead me in a better direction.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And the fact that it comes from a place of trauma or where you were experienced a very traumatic event. And again, made that choice at that time to look in the different or to go in a specific direction. I think a lot of people need to hear that. And I'm glad you're saying it here because I know that, and I know personally the feeling of feeling trapped in places, feeling trapped in whether it be a career or a relationship or what have you, and not feeling like there's a way to get out or that you have the courage or the strength. But recognizing that and showing that that's possible and showing that there's life beyond that, a joy beyond that, an excitement. That's great. I think that's great for a lot of people to hear. So I appreciate you sharing that. How is that? How about your career? So you've obviously developed as an athlete. You found that freedom. You even pursued the Ultraman, and you did amazing there. But how about your career? Because your career has leveled up quite a bit too. I mean, you've gone, you've excelled to the place where a lot of people are dream job kind of thing. So what has that trajectory been like, and what have you learned in that process?
Oh yeah, that's been
loaded
an
question.
Interesting ride too. Yeah. So if I go back, this is my second CEO position. So I was the CEO of a California company. We were about 120 people. And that was a huge opportunity. That was back in 2014 when I moved back from the East Coast to take on that role. And it was just a fantastic opportunity. We sold to a larger firm. So when all of this happened, I was an executive vice president managing the West Coast portion of the business that I'm now the CEO of. I knew that we were going through a CEO selection, and I knew that I could be a candidate. And I was very interested in the opportunity, but it's a civil engineering firm. We have an operations and management group, which is, running wastewater and water plants. It's a large firm. So, I'm younger than the typical candidate would be. I'm a woman. I'm in California. The company's based in Maine. There are a lot of reasons that it would have made sense to not pursue it. And, to be honest, I was sort of content with what I was doing at the time. I was still managing kind of the same group I had when I was the CEO out here, knew a lot of people really well. It wasn't particularly stretching me at that point. I could kind of do it in my sleep. I was liking the triathlon thing. But I just felt like I could give more and that people could benefit from the leadership that I could provide. And it sounds, I don't even like saying that out loud because it sounds like, well, what's so special about me? And I think it was just the fact of how we had operated, and that California group was a little bit different. And I felt like some of those learnings could help the rest of the company. I definitely went through periods where I wanted to pull my name out of the hat. But I have two kids. They're 12 and 14. I have a 14-year-old son and 12-year-old daughter. And part of the reason that I thought a lot about stepping back was, how can I do this? How can I be a fully present mom and a single mom half the time, and also, fully be present as a CEO? There's 1,200 people who are depending on that. And I think a big part of the decision came down to feeling like it's important that kids growing up, my daughter, my son, that they have an opportunity to live a full life. And that means be a CEO and be a parent and have athletics in their life or whatever it is. And that until people model that, it won't be normalized. And I had an opportunity that was, a lot of women would kill for. And I had that opportunity, and I felt a responsibility, honestly, to stay in the running, and to figure out how to make it work so that I could model that for, other girls, but also for my son, that you can do this. And it's not a matter of having it all. It's a matter of having what you prioritize.
Mm-hmm. So when you say having what you prioritize, can you kind of elaborate on that? What do you mean by what you prioritize? What do you
Yeah, I think there's this sense that, it used to be people tried to have it all and be it all.
Yeah.
And I would say, that is for me in my world, that would be like being the stereotypical CEO who's always traveling and who's everywhere, and the stay-at-home mom, right? And you can't have that, right? But what I can do is have what I prioritize. And the weeks my kids are here, I prioritize my kids and I don't travel. And the weeks that I don't have my kids, I prioritize being a CEO. And it doesn't mean that I'm bad at my job the weeks I have my kids. It means I'm not perfect at that, and that's not the priority. And it doesn't mean I'm a bad mom the weeks that I'm traveling for work or whatever. It just means that my priorities have to shift and flex, and I can have that, and I can make that work. It's just not the same as being the perfect stereotypical CEO and the perfect stereotypical stay-at-home mom and the perfect stereotypical triathlete. It's different, and it looks different. And for me, it's all of the pieces, and I think of it, I call it life Jenga. It's making all of the pieces fit, making all of the pieces fit so that the priorities are covered. Nice.
So it's really kind of letting go of perfection. So that's how you play life Jenga.
Yes.
Let go of perfection, and then prioritize the important things at that time. I love that perspective. Yeah.
And it's boundaries too. And I'm terrible at it. And I think there are a lot of expectations. One of the things that's the hardest thing for me is when there's a meeting for work on a week that I have my kids that I feel like, well, I should travel for that. And I'm not going to. Yeah. And it's hard for me to, number one, hold those boundaries, although I have to. And number two, communicate them. That's the piece that's so hard, because I feel like as a woman, a female CEO who's a mother, saying, I'm not going to go to that meeting because I have my kids, sounds like I'm not prioritizing my work. But I think it's important modeling for our people because, I'll be the first person to tell people like, oh, it's okay to prioritize your family. But if they don't see me doing it, they don't believe it's true.
Yeah.
But it's very hard for me because coming up through my career, I never really felt like that was okay. So yeah, it's about boundaries as much as anything else. And I think being open about what those are, especially if you're in a position of leadership, because you have that opportunity to model. And if you're not doing that, you're not taking advantage of the opportunity that you have to help other people.
Yeah, I agree completely with what you're saying. I mean, there seems to be a high standard already, like of just like, the eyes are on you as a leader, as a CEO of a company. It's just, whatever you do, it's scrutinized and so modeling that is important. And I would imagine, though, obviously can't relate as a woman, that's got to be that there has to be a higher bar or a higher standard set for that to get over. Do you feel that a lot? Is that still something you experience?
It is. A lot of it's really interesting because just coming up in engineering, you kind of become desensitized to it. And I've become more sensitized to it in this role because I'm trying really hard to model what I think is positive modeling. But I do think, over the years, it was men who would leave to go to a softball or, their kid's baseball game or whatever. It was sort of like, oh, they're a good dad. Whereas I know myself and other women, we didn't want to admit if we were going to do parenting type things because it was like, oh, well, she's a mom. And I think that's changing, but it's certainly something that I have to check myself on because for years that you just become conditioned to not talk about those things and to fit the mold that you're expected to fit. And now I have to recondition myself to really vocalize those things and overcome that fear really so that other people know that it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always hard to manage too, is not necessarily our intent, which is, my intent is obviously to treat everyone equally or treat everyone with equity. But there's those blind spots that we see, those subconscious blind spots, like you're talking about. Maybe we're participating in those double standards. So that's always something to be conscious of, and something I try to be conscious of too. But yeah, you're right. And so I'm glad you kind of put that into perspective on that, some of that double standard that's happening there.
Yeah.
So I kind of going into the life Jenga piece. I love that, and that's one thing that's always really been, something that's inspired me about you is just your ability to balance everything and do everything or do a lot of things that lift you up and build your career up, build those things up. What do you have any kind of advice for anybody who might be feeling like they're maybe they're feeling trapped, or they're feeling like they're just doing too much of something that they don't like and not enough of something that they do, and failing to prioritize as well?
Yeah. I would say follow your curiosity. Anything that you're curious about, anything that, if you turn on the TV and you see someone doing something and you think, gosh, that's amazing. I don't understand how they do that. Follow that. See where it leads you. Make time in your schedule. Prioritize some time for yourself and use that time to follow those curiosities and see where it takes you. I mean, I think a lot of how I ended up doing some of these really phenomenal things, it's hard for me to believe it. When I wrote it down for you, I was like, wow, this is pretty impressive looking. But it's every time I think I just thought, well, I wonder if I could do that, or I wonder what that would be like, or I can't believe people do that. I wonder what that's like. I mean, starting with just a triathlon, I remember thinking, this is such a huge thing. I don't think I can finish this. I don't even know how people do this. But I wonder what it's like. I wonder if I could. What if? So sometimes when there's that fear of failure or it feels, insurmountable, sometimes just starting with what if and asking yourself, well, what if I try it? What if I can do it? What if I could do that? What would that be like? And then just follow that and see where it takes you, because it can take you to some pretty amazing places. You know, I finished a triathlon, and then, well, what if I could do a half Ironman? And what if I could do an Ironman? And what if I could do an Ultraman? And wonder what it's like to run 100 miles. And then you realize, wow, that's not as far as I thought it was. You know, I think it's sort of amazing when you start from that what if place and you end up realizing, wow, that's really not as big as I thought it was. What's the next bigger thing? And then you can really kind of dig in and do stuff that is inspiring to you.
Yeah, I love that idea of being curious, because I think that one of the elements of being mindful or being present is really curiosity. It's awareness and curiosity. And that curiosity piece is a lot of times it's just immediately replaced by, I mean, I remember when I asked about the what if about Ironman the first time I did, and I was on the couch and I was drinking heavily at the time, and I saw it like, wow, what if I could do that? And then the other part of my mind just snapped up and said, shut the hell up, you can't do that. So just leave it alone. And then you never explore it. But that other piece that you mentioned, which is explore it, like, you know, lean into it or find out what's there. I love that, because that's what makes life an adventure. And adventure is one of the antidotes to anxiety and fear and all of that. So I love that. So you're starting to get now into more of the ultra distance running, like in the trail running and things like that. You've done a couple of races. Is that something? Are you pursuing anything in particular there, or is there what's next for you on that level?
Yeah, I don't even know if I want to admit it. So like biking, my beginnings in trail running were pretty rocky. I'm kind of a clumsy person. I always say I think I'm dedicating about 20% of my mental energy to not tripping over, like, most of the time. And that's on flat surface, you know, when I'm not running. Running on trails, I'm just notorious for falling. But I just did a lot of it this summer, and I was finally, you know, not falling every single time I went for a run. And I thought, well, if I'm never going to do this, let's try it this year. So I did a 100-mile trail race at the beginning of November, and it was awesome. I don't get a runner's high. So I'm not one of those people that I'm like, oh, I want to go run every day because it makes me feel so great. I have never had a runner's high when I've run less than like 35 miles. I mean, it's not, and then I don't even know if it's technically a runner's high. I think you're just sort of delirious at that point. So it's a little different. But so I did that run, and I was just amazed by how much I enjoyed it. And it was pouring rain, and it was 40 degrees, and I was cranky, just as you'd imagine, but it was a really cool experience. So I decided that I'm curious about what some of these crazy running events are like. And one that I have my sights set on right now that I haven't admitted out loud is Badwater. So you probably are familiar with Badwater. It goes from the lowest point in Death Valley to Whitney Portal. It's 135 miles. So I can't even apply for Badwater right now because you have to have run at least 3 100-mile races, and they have a list of preferred races. And so I can't even apply. But I decided that if I had done 3 100-mile races, even if they're not the right ones, at least I could submit an application. So I'm going to try to do 2 more before January.
Nice.
So we'll see how it goes.
Wait, January is like 2 weeks away. This will air in January. So we're going to know.
So I did my first 100 in November.
Yeah.
I'm going to do another 100 next weekend, and then another 100 at the beginning of January. And then I'm going to submit an application.
Wow.
And see where it goes, because I figure, well, 3 in 3 months is, you know, better than 3 in 3 years, even if they're not the right ones. And we'll see. I probably won't get accepted, but I'm going to try. And I may not even get through the 200s. So, you know, I've only done one, and I was surprised by how well I recovered. I seem to recover pretty quickly from it. So I think I'll be fine to run this weekend. But then, you know, I'll only have 4 weeks before the next one. So it's most of the time is recovering. You feel better, or I felt better after about a week, but it took about 3 weeks for all of my metrics to kind of come back to normal. So we'll see. If my body holds up, I'm going to do 2 more and apply, and we'll see what happens next.
Well, that's awesome. Well, now it's out in the universe. So now it's going to happen, right? So that's
I'm
awesome. Committed.
I know, it's scary.
So that's incredible. Yeah, the Badwater, that is definitely a big bucket list race, and so kind of give some perspective on that too. That's done in the middle of summer, right? In Death Valley, is that?
Yeah, it's the 4th of July.
So 4th of July, 120 degree heat. Yeah, Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So
your shoes melt and you have to run on
yeah,
the white line. So yeah, it sounds
sounds
fun,
fun.
right? Well, I think it's all about that curiosity. And once you do one thing, realizing like, wow, okay, so what would it be like to do something longer? Or what would it be like to do that in a really hot environment? Or what would it be like to do that, faster? Or, just how will my body hold up? How will I train for it? What can I learn? I felt like I learned so much just in the 100 that I did. Things that as an endurance athlete for years now, you'd think I would know. Like I learned about fueling on the run in the middle of a 100-mile race after I've been running, for years and years.
Is
So
it pizza? It's pizza, right? Pizza.
it was quesadillas. I'm
Quesadillas,
plant-based.
okay.
I'm plant-based, and I was chicken stock and quesadillas, but it was life. But you learn because you can't fake it through some of these longer things, and you learn a
Yeah.
lot about yourself and about, both physically and mentally and emotionally what you need to do to get through tough spots, and that applies across life.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love about it. I mean, we jokingly say, "Oh, sounds like fun to do 100 miles in 120." But the challenge of that, I mean, some people might look at that the perspective of like, "Oh, I don't want to experience the pain of that." But others of us think of it like, "Wow, to experience the achievement of that, to rise above that feeling of not knowing if we could do something like that and then doing it." I mean, that's powerful. There's a powerful force there that pulls us to it. And so I totally get it. I mean, it's just like it's just like this feeling of like, if I could do that, what else can I do, and where else can I take this? It's the right kind of discomfort to lean into.
Yeah.
So
And
I
the,
love
the
it.
thing that's so interesting about ultra running that I didn't really experience with triathlon is like after I'm running for, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours, I'm going to 100% break down and have horrible, horrible, horrible experiences. And if I stay out there, I will have wonderful experiences. And that's like, it is guaranteed. And it's just reinforcing that if you can continue to manage yourself and keep moving forward in sport or in life, it changes. And there's good on the other side of that. And I will say too, there's nothing better than something as simple as a hot shower. After you've been out in the mud and rain for 24 hours and you're sitting on the floor of the tub with hot water running on you, that's bliss. And so just being able to put everything in perspective, it's really powerful. It's just while you're out there and then after in the reflection, I think it helps to put a lot of things into perspective and really helps me to be grateful for very small things as well.
Yeah, that's an incredible perspective, and one that's a good reminder to keep those little things in perspective. When we're too comfortable, a lot of those those little comforts we take for granted. But when we are uncomfortable, when we really can't appreciate it, I think that's a huge lesson we could take from that. And then how about what's next for you? I mean, I know you're talking about more ultra stuff and all that kind of stuff, but where are you going from here? I know you're traveling the country in the van. What else is going on? What else are you doing?
Well, I did sit down, so I am a little bit embarrassed to admit that I never really had gotten into journaling, and I love writing. And I will say, when I had my bike accident, that was one of the things that really got me through it. Mm-hmm. When you read your thoughts, or write them down or speak them and listen to them, if you're like me, you cannot listen to yourself being negative and whiny and complaining, and you immediately start to reframe. So that was a really powerful tool for me in my recovery, and I just love to write. So I did start journaling again recently because I was feeling a little bit like I was in a rut, like where am I going, what's next? And I actually am going to try to write a book. So that's totally different. It's not, my professional direction, and it's not my athletic direction. And I don't really want to do an autobiography because I don't feel like my story is ready to be written. But I do want to write about some of the things I've learned. I've done a ton of reading around, values and value-driven life. And I've had practice in turning things around and using tools to turn things around in my life. And I would really like to help other people, provide other people with tools that they can use to get on a more positive path. So that's my next project, and I have no idea how long it's going to take me. I'm going to try to do it over the course of the year, but I gave myself, I don't have to start until January, and I'm gonna work on a book next year.
I'm really excited to hear that. I'm really, really glad to hear that. I'm also really glad to hear that the language you used around not writing your autobiography, because I want to read your autobiography, but the fact that you said it's not ready to be written yet, that's fine. But that you have a story worth telling for sure. But I'm excited to read because I think the values thing of it, or values within our world, I mean, especially when we want to find our purpose, so powerful, and we need more of that. And I think someone like you writing that's a great voice to have that come from. I'm really excited to see that come to fruition, and hopefully talk to you again on this show about that very subject.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. More to come on that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you very much for being here, Alyson. I love your story. I'm grateful that you shared some time with me. And where can people find you? What if they want to reach out?
Yeah, I'm not really very out there. I am on Instagram. It's Allie Paris, and Facebook, but that's about it. I'm kind of just doing my own thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Alyson. I'm very grateful. And to all of you out there, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Flow Over Fear podcast. If you'd like to learn more about getting into flow and learn the foundations of flow, I have a free video series on my website at www.adamcliffordhill.com called The Foundations of Flow. Feel free to go there and download it and start your journey to rising above fear and achieving greater flow in your life. And if you like this episode, and I'm guessing you did if you stuck around for this long, then please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, and you will receive notifications when I have new interviews, new recaps, and new trainings that pop up on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us.